If you're planning to take the MET exam, but you don't know its content, or you may want to have some advice, keep on watching this video. Hey, this is Joel, and today I want to share with you my experience taking the MET or Michigan English Test. The first thing to highlight is that I decided to go for the 4 skill test. As some of you know, MET has two types of exams, the 2 skill test and the 4 skill test. So first thing, as some time ago I did the 2 skill test, I was looking forward to start with listening, but surprisingly, when the exam started, I started with writing. That was the first thing that was shocking for me because, okay, I was waiting for the listening part, but it didn't happen. I started with writing. So what did I find in writing? The usual components. I found 4 questions, 3 questions that are quite short, and one that is the essay in just 45 minutes. That is the standard writing section of MET. Something important to know is that you will have a word counter, you will have a timer, so you don't need to be counting how many words you have, how much time you have left. Also, you will have access to the timer and to the word counter. Additionally, you can move backwards or forwards in the writing section. So you can decide to answer quickly question number 1, quickly question number 2, quickly question number 3, and later you go for number 4. If you have some time left, you can go back to question number 1. In this case, 3 out of 4 questions were regarding topic of traveling, which is a quite common topic and necessary. I think that you need to go with a structure. You need to have clear what structure you will use for your writing exercises. Otherwise, it would be quite hard and demanding that you have just 45 minutes to answer those 4 questions. So definitely you need to go quickly in the writing part, in the very first sections of the writing part, in order to have time for the last task, that is an essay, in which you need to write much more. The next thing I found was listening. It started with listening and after writing, but I was waiting for it. I was looking forward to having it as the first skill to be evaluated. It didn't happen, but well, it was not uncomfortable. Listening. And the listening part, what was happening? The listening part was, as usual, 3 different parts, but over here, something that I used to do, by the time I did the last test, I did it on paper-based, and the paper-based, I needed to fill in the circles, and I had the answer sheet, I have a booklet. So by that time, I could observe the questions before the audio started. I could see the questions and I could start like making that planning before the audio started. But being on computer, it didn't allow me to do it. The questions are just available once the audio starts, and that's something important to highlight. Whenever the audio starts, at that time, you will be able to see the question. So there is no previous planning. Just need to be listening and reading at the same time in order to answer the questions at a good time. If you decide probably to listen and later read the questions, it might take you longer, which will affect the time that you will have available. Something that I wanted to test during the moment that I was doing the listening was not to answer for a minute approximately. I decided not to answer to see what happened, if the system would take me for the next question, or to say like, now time is running, go next. No, it didn't happen anything. I stayed for 1 minute with no answering, no moving, and the time was just running. So important for you to know. You need to answer as fast as possible in order not to waste any minute. Something that I would say is like you can spend about 20 seconds, 30 seconds per answer. And I realized about something. When I was about to end the listening part, I like didn't know what number of question I was. I could see what the time was. I was looking at the time and said, okay, I'm missing like 2 minutes, something like that. And I was listening to an audio. I said, okay, how many questions am I missing? I don't know. So I wanted to know how many questions I was missing, and guess what? I couldn't know. I couldn't know how many questions I was missing. I could just see the time, but I wasn't able to see how many questions were left. So it's like, wow, it's different to IELTS, it's different to TOEFL, where you can see the number of questions you're missing. In this case, it wasn't possible. And I think it's something not that convenient because you need to take into account what audio you are listening to in order for you to know if you are close to end or if you are still good on time, Before continuing, I want to let you know that we have opened the registration for the MET course, a course that includes all the things you need to know before taking it. Strategies for reading, for writing, for grammar, speaking, and listening. So the invitation to follow the link that is in the descriptions and go and register for the MET course. The next section was reading. So in the reading, what we have? Well, something to highlight there, super important. Reading is divided in two main parts, grammar and reading. So when we start, you even can decide whether you start with the grammar or reading. Why? Because in this section, you can move freely. You can move grammar questions, later you go to the reading, later you can go back to the grammar. Of course, that is that you have a strategy, that you know what to do first. You want to start with reading, go ahead and start with reading. You want to start with grammar, go ahead and start with grammar. But you always need to know what to decide to start with, and something super important, time. You will have 65 minutes to answer 50 questions. So are 20 questions for grammar, 30 questions for reading. How you decide to organize the time is something super important for you to know what to start with. The 20 questions that I have regarding grammar were the traditional common topics, which I will be exploring in the next video that I will be later uploading over here, the link for that one, and you will have access to that information. So common grammar topics. So far, what kind of topics you have? Conditionals, prepositions, pronouns, something regarding inverted sentences, some common topics regarding the MET that usually are repetitive. And in the reading part, the traditional section, that are two type of texts, like kind of long with 5 questions, and other ones that are A, B, and C texts. And for this A, B, C, you always have 10 questions. The same type of questions as always, some of them vocabulary, some of them infer. By that day, I was quite sick, super sick. However, I had already postponed my exam because of a mistake in the registration of the academy, and I needed to postpone it 8 days. By that time, I got sick, and I didn't want to postpone it one more time. So I decided to go. I was quite sick, honestly. But by the time I arrived there, it was super hard to do the reading part in that condition. Nevertheless, I decided to go for it. However, it was kind of hard because I couldn't concentrate that much. And there was a point which I said, like, I cannot find information. Is he talking about it? And what I realized by that moment, it was that there were some kind of infer questions, and they didn't say, like, what can you infer? No, I knew that it was infer because I saw that the question, the vocabulary they were using in the question, it was not the same vocabulary they were using in the text. And they needed us to find the answer of those questions, like interpreting the reading. And that's something I work in my classes with the course that I have already mentioned. So it's super important to know how to interpret the reading part, because it's not only to find one word and go and give the answer. We need to understand the text deeply in order to get to some of those answers. Of course, exist every single type of question. There exist easy questions and difficult questions. Some of them were difficult, and I found that I needed to infer. By the time I was sick, my mind was not working like I wanted it to work. So it took me longer to try to find those answers. At the end, the time was not an issue. Reading was okay. Time for the grammar was okay. But just I highly recommend you to have a plan. Know what you're going to do first. Is it going to be grammar? Is it going to be reading? You can move freely, but under the 65 minutes. So try to be careful about it. And well, something important to highlight over here, that in the reading section, you can have access to the number of questions. So you will have a list and say, okay, what questions I have answered, what questions I have not answered, and the timer. You will always have access to the timer. Final part of the exam. In the final part of the exam, what we had is speaking. In speaking, we will have 5 different questions. We will be answering one after the other one. The first 3 questions have some time and the last 2 questions are longer. So you need to have a strategy in order to answer them better. The first 3 questions you need to speak for 1 minute, and the last 2 questions you need to speak for 1.5 minutes. That's the total speaking component of the MET. But something important to highlight is that whenever you start doing the speaking, you will have that you read the question, as usual, and once the question is read, immediately you need to start speaking. There is no something that would allow you to know that you need to speak, like, for example, start speaking now or start speaking after the beep and you listen a beep and you see the time running. No, it's like the question is read and right away you need to start speaking because there is a bar with a timer, will start running down. So in that moment you need to start speaking. Also, something super important to mention for people who might not have any experience about the exam is that you have no time for planning. There is no time for you to think what you're gonna say, what you might answer. It's like you have the question and right away you need to answer. For that reason, similar to writing, you need to have a plan. You need to have a structure of saying, okay, what I'm going to do is this one. If I have this type of question, I'm going to answer in this way, or I'm going to answer in this other way. For the reason, I have created a course in which I explain you all of these kind of strategies you need to know before going to the MET exam. And later, I just needed to wait for my scores. I received them quite quickly. I received my scores 3 business days, so it was quite quick when I received my score. Fortunately, I received a C1 level, and that's why I want to share with you my experience, not only taking this exam, but also the techniques I use and how I was able to achieve a C1. If you feel that this video was helpful for you, just hit the like button and subscribe for notification. One new video will be released every week.